Abimelech in the land of the Philistines, and Isaac had gotten really blessed. He had acquired a lot of wealth, and the Philistines were tired of him, and Abimelech was tired of the Abimelech of that time was tired of him as well, because he was tired of the complaining. And so they basically, go away, get away from us. And they had the disputes over the wells we talked about last time. If you start covering up people's wells, that's a bad day when you've got hundreds of livestock, you've got quite a few people in your family. And so they struck a deal, and they continue to strike a deal there in the end of chapter 26, toward the end of 26. There was some sort of artificial peace between Isaac and the Philistines. Now, if you get into the very end of chapter 26, we get into something we don't tend to just really study a lot, but in 34 and 35, chapter 26, verses 34 and 35. So this is one of these parts of the Bible that we may not, my Bible here is not switching for me particularly well right in this second. But look at 34 and 35 if you would. And if someone would, go ahead and read that, please.
And Esau was 40 years old, and he took to wife Judah, the daughter of Uri the Hittite, and Bathsheba, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, which was a grief of mine unto Isaac and to Rebekah.
Okay. So Esau, it says there how old he is. He's roughly my age. I'm older than Esau in this passage now, unfortunately. So this is a good deal. So what's the big problem here? We've got the son of Isaac. We have this potential lineage. We have this lineage, this promise of this nation. You know, and we know already that it's not going to come through Esau. But what are Esau's issues here? What did we call him last week? What was the name that sums up Esau? Starts with the letter P. He's profane. So why is he profane? Basically, he hates all spiritual things. To put it in a real quick nutshell, he just does not like spiritual things at all. And how do we really start adding to that and understanding that more fully? It's this verse right here. What's going to really show that he does not care anything about his parents' religion or their faith? Go marry someone that really, truly is off the rails when it comes to spiritual things. So you think about these Hittites. Are they worshiping the one Jehovah God? No, they've got their own idols, and they've got a plethora of them, and most likely they are living a lifestyle that is very foreign to what Abraham's been taught, what that family has been taught, and Isaac has been taught. You're talking about the whole dancing and drinking and partying and just a lack of immorality in general is what some teachers theorize. And so Esau has put himself in this situation, and he is really just honed in on it. And he enjoys that. And so he's going to marry these women. And how do Isaac and Rebekah take it? It says there that made them bitter. And we will see again that Rebekah, she again says, my life is basically, this has ruined my life. My life is nothing because of these Hittite women. And so this is a big deal. It's no small thing. So Esau, for whatever reason, has decided to totally rebel against what he has been taught. And it is interesting, this whole dynamic of this family. So we know that these people are that Isaac in particular, the lineage of Abraham, these are God's faithful. But we also realize that they really had a lot of problems, and they really had a lot of issues. And one thing that comes to me here is, why did God spend so much time in terms of documenting all of this information for us? Why is Isaac and Rebekah in here of such great detail, and even more so Jacob? Jacob is has the most information almost of any one particular person in the book of Genesis. Why? Not much of it's good. It's pretty rough. So why does God give us this? Well, there's a reason, obviously, and we need to soak it all up best we can. There's so many things that we can learn. And one other thing to throw in there is when we put somebody under a microscope, they look bad. You put Jason Duggin under a microscope, and I'm going to look pretty bad. If you knew everything that I've ever done, it was all listed out, written in a book like it is for Jacob and for Isaac and for Rebekah, it would not look very pretty. And I think we could all say that there's places in our lifespan and our history that we'd like to just go ahead and delete that part, but it's still there. And for these folks here that we're learning back in the book of Genesis, it's there until Jesus returns. And so we have to understand that there's a lot of faithfulness that there is in here, and then a lot of things we need to take away from that are negative that we should learn about. And one of those things is, like we talked about last week, the teaching about our children about who they're going to marry, having that example, prayerfully, praying for them, obviously, and just making sure that they're taught how important it is, the rules that Jesus has set forth about marriage. All right, so getting into chapter 27 in verse 1, you guys are very familiar with this account of whatever you want to call it, Isaac going to bless Esau and how all that unfolds. So let's look at verses 1 through 4 here in 27. If someone would go ahead and read 1 through 4, please.
When Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." He said, "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver, and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food, such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die."
Okay. This seems fairly innocent. I think when you read this, you see the love of a father and a son. They have this mutual bond. Unfortunately, it's unmutual for Isaac and Jacob, meaning he's favoring one son, and we know that that's wrong and a sin. But otherwise, it seems like a very natural thing. One thing that hits my mind when I read this, and I'm trying to pull out every single thing that I can apply to my life, if I had a blessing to give and I could give it, don't wait. What's going on here is not correct in terms of what's basically all going to happen. But if Isaac had a real blessing he needed to give and he wanted to give it, why did he need to say, "I don't need a bowl of soup to bless my son. Let's just go ahead and bless my son if I've got the power to do it and the wherewithal to do it." He wanted to have his belly filled, and he was worried about his bowl of soup, and that's fine in some ways, but, why tarry? And is what hits my mind in that. So he wants his favorite meal, Isaac does, and then he wants to give a blessing to Esau.
Do you think that was a tradition?
It certainly could have been a tradition of some kind. There's no doubt that there's something along those lines, that there was some kind of rite of passage, if you will, for sure.
Esau was the firstborn, correct?
Mm-hmm. He was. But we also know that what's the word Jacob mean? Yeah, subplanter. So from the very beginning, Rebekah knew that he was going to be the heel grabber, and Esau was probably kind of aware of this as well. And as you see, we read this passage that Esau even says, is he not called the subplanter? Is he not called Jacob? He understands that there's this dynamic going on for sure. Verses 5 through 10, Rebekah overhears and instructs Jacob in her plan for him to receive the blessing. So this is a lack of faith in Jehovah and his ability to keep his promises. So there's a promise that has been made back when Rebekah learned about her pregnancy and all that was going to take place. Verses 11 through 13, Jacob fears detection. So, Jacob's not worried about actually doing the deed. He's worried about what? Yeah. He's worried about getting caught. And so this, again, I don't want to hammer down on these people because we can sit here and just hammer on these people, but there is a lot of wrong in this family. Just the deception, husband to wife, brother to brother, child to parent. It is not good. They are not on the same page even remotely. And this is very much a modern day Jerry Springer type scenario that we've got going on here. And it's unfortunate. And it should really sober us up. And the things that we do, the things that we allow to take place in our home are truly important in every single facet. They let some things linger that we're not taking care of, apparently. So verses 14 through 17, Rebekah then increases the deception by Esau's clothes, all those things, the pelts from the goats. 18 through 20, Jacob carries out the plan by going to Isaac, pretending to be Esau. So not only is Jacob lying with his actions, but now he will lie with his words as well. And he says that he is Esau. He says that he's somebody else. So again, God is able to bless as he intended without the people trying to circumvent him. God doesn't need people to lie. He doesn't need people to deceive, to carry out his promises and the things that he wants to have done. Period. Can God still make things happen even though we mess up and we do silly stuff, bad stuff? Yes. He can make it happen however he needs it to happen. But he did not intend for these people to lie and deceive each other. That would just be a terrible thought. So in 21 through 26, the deception is complete. Jacob receives the blessing. So if we go down to verse 21, then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come near, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." So he understands that there's probably something up. Isaac almost wanted to be, he was almost just waiting for this in some ways, it seems. So Jacob went near to Isaac, his father, who felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. He said, "Are you really my son Esau?" So there's this confusion. He questions the whole thing and still does it. This is just sad. We need to make sure that we contain as much trust as we can in our home. When it comes to things that matter of such importance, we just really have to have as best a communication as we can. So there's been a long line of lying here. Abraham, he lied to two different Abimelechs. Isaac has lied to an Abimelech, and there is just this deception, and it continues on, and we will see it will not get any better as we continue on in here. Verses 36 and 38 are truly sad, and the deception is really unfortunate. Esau said, is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me 2 times. So he's talking about his name, the supplanter. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. Then he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? So Esau gave away his birthright for a bowl of soup. He didn't care about it anyway. He did not care. Remember, he's worried about his Hittite women and his worldly pleasures and his running away from the faith of his parents, basically. That's what he's most concerned about. He really didn't care about that, or at least it's the way his actions told us. But now he's upset. And you understand that. He's upset. He feels like he's been tricked. Verse 38, Esau said, let's go ahead. Yeah.
But you can't live in a house that way and not know, and then if you are brought up and your mother feels that way about you, no wonder he didn't really care about his birthright.
Yep, that's right. Oh, yeah. I would say that last point you made there really sums it up very well. His mother, you know, of all of them, you know, the deception all around, it really wore on him, obviously, to some degree. What's that now? Well, I would say that all of this goes back to Isaac, because he's the head of the household. So Isaac should have been a better husband in some form or fashion. There's no doubt that he had a role to play in this. Should Rebekah have done better? Absolutely. But it comes back to the head of the household, and he's the one that's ultimately, to me, that has the most to blame here, because he's also loved his one son versus another, and he shouldn't have done that either. Oh yeah, she does the same, yes. So there's a lot to be said here. For who's to blame, I'm not going to say it's just Rebekah, because ultimately, if you're the head of the household, you take some responsibility. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Right there where you were, in verse 36, where he says, Esau is saying, he took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, Esau gave away his birthright.
Mm-hmm.
His birthright was because he was the firstborn, and along with that, he was to get the blessing. But when he gave up his birthright, he also really gave up his blessing. But I don't know who knew about
Well,
that.
the way that I see the teachers that I follow in this right here, really the way God had already ordained it at pregnancy, it was supposed to be that way anyway. So Esau really didn't have a birthright to sell anyway, is what they would say. And this all gets very complicated. I'm not telling you I understand it all. But from what I've heard is that Esau didn't really truly have the birthright anyway. So, yeah. It gets challenging. Yeah, Jacob the supplanter. And it's all very challenging, but as we point to every week, I go back to what Brother Bob has said. There's some things we just don't know. We have to leave it up to God and just roll with it, learn what we can out of it, for sure. All very good points, things to talk about, for sure. Verses 27 through 29, prophecy of Jacob's future. Verses 30 through 35, the plot is discovered, but too late for Esau. We just read through some of that. He says, is there not a blessing for me in 36 through 38? Now, 39 through 40, Esau kind of gets a blessing. He's basically said, eventually you're going to break loose of your brother. You're going to go out and do your own thing. That's going to be the blessing that you have left. Verse 41, Esau hates Jacob and plots to kill him. So he's ready. As soon as Isaac dies, he's going to attempt to, in his mind at least, he wants to try to attempt to take care of his brother, to take him out. And again, we have two brothers that should love each other and just hate all the way around. A lack of communication and deception. 42 through 46, Rebekah hears and makes plans for Jacob's safety. Of course, here's Rebekah trying to get into, as was mentioned a little bit earlier, trying to get in probably the word she didn't really need to be. I'll leave that up for your opinion on that one. Chapter 28. Isaac sends Jacob to Laban for a wife. So Isaac sends Jacob to Laban for a wife. So the whole deal here is that Jacob does not need a wife from where? The Hittites. So we've got to go back to the old home country, the old homeland, for Jacob to find a wife. Do not marry these ungodly Canaanites as Esau did. So verses 3 through 5, Isaac calls for Jacob to bless Jacob with Abraham's blessing. And verses 6 through 9, Esau despises Isaac's wishes. So in spite, he marries Canaanite women. And we had the vision of Jacob's ladder. The angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And verses 13 through 15, the promise of Abraham confirmed to Jacob. And verses 16 through 19, Jacob builds a pillar to mark his holy place. He renames it Bethel, house of God. All right, so we rolled through that fairly quickly. We've got plenty that we can cover. So 20 through 22, Jacob's vow. So Jacob's vow, this is important. Let's go here to verses 20 through 22. It's all important, but something we want to focus on. Chapter 28, 20 through 22. So go ahead and somebody would go ahead and read that, please.
And Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me and keep me in this way that I am going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to put on, so that I come back to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set as a pillar shall be God's house. And all of that which you give to me will surely give a tenth to you."
Okay. That's valuable stuff for us. So Jacob has made this promise that he's going to be faithful in a sense. They didn't have the covenant that we have today, but he says, I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to follow you, Jehovah God. And this is important. He says, I'm going to give a tenth. He has really kind of freely offered this, if you will. He said, I'm going to give a tenth. This is no small thing. And he is obviously someone that is going to eventually arise at great wealth. It's going to take a while, but he's going to have the wealth that has continued in his family lineage. So this is something that is important. We want to mimic that kind of parts of Jacob. We're going to give him a hard time. We're going to learn about all the negative things he's done, but he has at least said, I'm going to try to follow you, God, and not be taken away like the Canaanites and other types of cultures. All right. So we're moving on into chapter 29. Jacob comes to Laban's well. So this is, you would hope that things would start getting better for Jacob, but they don't. They do not, unfortunately. So chapter 28. Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and directed him, you must not take a wife from the Canaanite women. Arise, go to Paddan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take as your wife from there one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply, that you may become a company of peoples. May he give the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojourners that God gave to Abraham. Thus Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Paddan Aram to Laban, the son of Bethuel, the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob's and Esau's mother. All right. If we get on down to verse 6, now Esau saw that Isaac had blessed him and sent him away to Paddan Aram to take a wife from there, that he blessed him, directed him, and he understands, he kind of repeats this thing we've already learned, that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother. And we see, I'm actually in 28 and need to be on down into 29, and I apologize about that. I was repeating something I thought I already went over. Sorry about that. 6 and 29, sorry about that, guys. He said to them, is it well with him? They said, is it well? And see, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. Is there peace to him? So we're going to have Jacob finding Rachel here. Jacob meets and greets Rachel. Rachel tells her father Laban, and Laban greets Jacob. So this is where it gets interesting. So verses 15 through 20, Jacob serves Laban for how long? Well, total, that's right. So Jacob's going to serve how long for Rachel? 7 years. All right. And we can learn some things here, for sure. Be careful who your in-laws are, right? We can say that for sure. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? He's saying, I'm going to pay you. This is someone you would hope to be on your side, but he is definitely a crook to the nth degree. Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters, and you know that story, Leah and Rachel. I almost wanted to see if I could have had some cash on me. I was going to give $5 to the person that could tell me, what does the Leah mean? What does her name mean? Well, she does have weak eyes, but there's also another one too. I mean, the people that know how to translate all this stuff, they say it means one of 2 or 3 things, but most people say her name means wild cow. Wild cow. So be careful how you name your kids. So if you're Jacob and you come to Laban and he's got 2 daughters and one of them's named Wild Cow, you're thinking, probably not that one. You have to be careful with wild cattle for sure. Some other people say giraffe, that it could mean giraffe, which who knows. And then, well, yeah, she did have a lot of calves, that's for sure, eventually. And there's other unflattering potential names for Leah. So obviously, Laban is worried about finding a home for his eldest daughter, and he's going to try to take care of it best he can. So you've got wild cow, and Rachel could mean something along the lines of ewe, E-W-U. A ewe, if you don't have an old school ranching background, I guess, it's just a female sheep. Ewe sounds better than wild cow in most circles, at least. And then we talked also about the eye issue. Leah's eyes were delicate. Leah was tender-eyed. She was not sharp-eyed. And so we have 21 through 25, Laban's deception. Then let's look at verse 21. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. So we see here that there's this, basically a contract. I'm going to serve 7 years, and I'm going to have my wife. Is there any account of anything happening between Jacob and Laban? No, everything looks wonderful. 7 years has gone by like that. Jacob thinks he's going to marry the woman of his dreams, and it was joyful to him. Everything's wonderful. Everything's great. That 7 years was an awesome thing. He just cannot wait to receive his bride. Verse 22, so Laban gathered together all the people in the place and made a feast. But in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave... Well,
It was dark, and Leah was in on it too, and she wouldn't have said anything.
yeah. So there's a lot of good questions that we could ask. We don't know the answers to those. We can theorize, but probably don't need to dwell on it too much. What's that now?
She was probably veiled as well.
Yes, that's the most common thought, is she was veiled. So let's look at, we'll comment on that here just a little bit. So remember, this is going to be a legit wedding. So Laban has been thinking about this for how long? 7 years. I mean, this has not happened in 24 hours like we're reading it here. There has been a lot of thought put into this. And we know that through the next few chapters of the Bible here, that Laban is the most deceiving, unhonorable person that you can come across almost that's decent. Meaning he's not going out killing people. But man, you're talking about somebody who's deceptive and just, you cannot trust his word. It's this guy. And it's unfortunate. So he has thought about it for 7 years. We have this nighttime thing. And I'm always curious, as basically Jennifer kind of pointed out, did the girls not know about this? This guy's just not hanging around for 7 years in secret. there's going to be something happening. So Rachel and or Leah should have known about this wedding. Maybe Laban told Leah, this is going to be your husband. Maybe there was this much separation between them. I don't know. It seems unrealistic to think that. But, yeah.
Jason?
Yes,
I think Laban was Rebekah's brother. They were brother and sister, correct?
Yeah.
And they were both deceptive.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this, when I read this, and I think back how this is kind of a little payback
Oh, yeah.
to Jacob
Mm-hmm.
for his part in the deception that his mother planned.
Yep.
Now her brothers planned this deception against him so that the firstborn, his firstborn daughter,
Yep.
takes the younger one's place, well, where the younger son took the older one's place.
Yep. There's definitely a whole lot of that going on, and that continues on, that same thing. The supplanter is going to be supplanted, basically, in multiple ways down through here. So yes, that's a great point. Seeds of trouble is what we have here. Jacob has 2 wives over the course of the 14 years, and then he stays a little bit longer. It's going to end up being 20 years. And just an unfortunate set of circumstances. One thing that we can see here, though, is when Jacob learned that Leah was his wife, there was no such thing as divorce. It doesn't matter how it happened. It was what it was, period. And we can learn that looking at Matthew 19, that before Moses, there was no such thing as divorce. He owed up to what he had committed. There was a lot of things that went wrong, obviously, but in this commitment, that's it, period. He's not saying, I got tricked, I need an annulment, I need my quickie divorce. No, this was a legit deal, and he honored it, even though there's going to be a lot of strife here, unfortunately. So we look at chapter 29, starting in verse 31, and we start to see, as my father-in-law mentioned here, the wild cow starting to have a lot of calves, and she has, the 4 in particular in 32 through 35. And I'll tell you what the people who translate these names, what they mean. First is going to be Reuben. Look, a son is what his name Reuben means. Second is Simeon. His name means hearing. Third is Levi, which means attachment. And you can read more detail in there in those, in that account of why she might have named them certain names. And fourth is Judah, praised. And we know about the tribe of Judah.
But then it also shows that God's kind of approval and love for Leah, because
Yeah.
like Levi and Judah, those are major tribes, and so there had to be
Yeah.
kind of that approval.
Well, he opened her womb, and she was being hated, as it says there. That there was some definite strife and problems here. And yes, so God still showed some favor to her. As we read here, we don't see that Leah really has a lot of blame here. This is more of a bless her heart type situation. She's kind of thrown in the midst of all this, as it seems, as we understand it and read it. But I think that's a good point. Chapter 30, verses 1 through 4, Rachel gives her handmaid Bilhah to Jacob. Why did she do that? Yeah. Jacob knew why Rachel was barren. Jehovah had withheld conception from her. Verse 2. And so in verses 5 through 8, there's 2 more children born for Rachel, not by Rachel. So we have this continual issue with polygamy and this whole handmaid thing. This is not God's design. They're using it. Remember, God winks at this stuff, as we see he said, in the former times I winked at. He does not approve of this. He kind of just says, okay, we'll take care of that later. You could put that in multiple ways, but God is not okay with this. We have 5th and 6th children are Dan and Naphtali. Dan means vindication, and Naphtali means wrestling. Verse 9, Leah stops bearing, so gives her handmaid Zilpah to Jacob. Born to Zilpah for Leah is Gad. Luck is his name. And the 8th child is Asher, which means fortune or blessed in the King James Version. 14 through 16 verses. Leah hires Jacob for Rachel. Mandrakes, we see the mandrakes. There's going to be this mandrake supposed to be a love apple and promotes fertility. 17 through 21, finally, we're getting down to the last few kids here. Born to Leah, God heard her prayers. Issachar and Zebulun. Issachar means reward, and Zebulun means dwelling. Dinah is thrown in there as another child born to Leah. Compare with Dan. Her name also means vindication. And finally, Rachel. God heard her prayers also. 11th and 12th children. Joseph means may he add, and Benjamin means son of my right hand. See chapter 35, verse 18. All right. Jacob bargains for Laban for his release. Again, Laban does not want to let him go. Why does Laban not want to let him go? Yeah, that's about the best way you can put it. He's getting very wealthy and very rich. So Jacob, he's got problems, he's got issues, he's got things that he should not have done, but he's a worker bee. He's taking care of business. I mean, he's grown the herds. Laban would not have anything. And another point to think about here is Jacob has done this all for Laban. He hasn't really benefited a lot to this point. It's not like he's getting wealthy and all this work. No, he's just trying to do the right thing, it seems, for this contract and for his father-in-law. He's just trying to be a good son-in-law, even though he got 2 wives out of the deal, and he was only bargaining for 1. So it is very interesting. So we have the whole situation here with the sheep and the goats, and we can look here on the livestock side of things, and see, we're in verse 32 of 30, chapter 30. Let's look at verse 32 of chapter 30 as just kind of a get back to the Bible here a little bit. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. This is Jacob talking about Laban. But now, when shall I provide my own household also? Verse 31, he said, what shall I give you? Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and every spotted sheep and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats. They shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later. When you come to look into my wages with you, every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen. And God's going to be with Jacob here on this, right? There's going to be this divine intervention, if you will, with the way that things work out. So, let's see here. Verse 35, but that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in the charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days journey between himself and Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. And then it had this account about Jacob putting the sticks in the water and all that. And all very, very interesting, the mindset here. Verse 39, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, and so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted, and Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped, and all the black in the flock of Laban. But we see that Jacob's going to be blessed in this deal, basically, that he's going to receive a lot of blessing. All right. Jacob's methods appear to be working. He became exceedingly prosperous. So let's look at chapter 31. Jacob flees from Laban. Laban and his sons have unrest over Jacob's increased wealth. Imagine, we have more wealth, more division. Same thing held true with Isaac when he was in the land of the Philistines. The same thing here. We have a problem when people start getting really wealthy and we don't think we're getting in on the deal. That's just human nature, unfortunately. We have to guard ourselves against our own covetousness for sure. Verse 3, Jehovah tells Jacob to return home. So that's not insignificant. This is a God-commanded thing. Verses 4 through 13, Jacob tells Rachel and Leah of Jehovah's command and reminds them of their father's deceit. Verses 14 through 16, they both agree that they should obey and leave. So this is, I think, helpful for context. Let's go on down there to 14 through 16. So, I don't know all of the details of how these girls were supposed to have kind of a safety blanket in case the husband dies, as how I understand it. If you guys have a different, if you've been taught differently on that or have greater understanding, please let me know. I'll talk about it. But they're upset because Laban, as usual, has deceived and basically taken what was not his. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, "Is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house?" Basically, they've lost everything that they were supposed to have had. Verse 15, "Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us and has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do." So they're in on, let's get out of here. Our dad is a crook, to put it real quick. So they're 3 days' journey away. They're 3 days' journey away. And let me see. Verse 22, it says, "It is 3 days before Laban learns of their absence." And they're a pretty good ways away. And how quickly does he come? Laban overtakes Jacob in 7 days. So this is, as I understand it through some of the reading that I've looked here in this book from the Memphis School of Preaching, this is around 300 miles. This is a long trip. A lot of us, if we were wronged by somebody and it was a 300-mile drive down the road, we're like, maybe I'll wait till they get back, kind of a thing. But he's on a mission. 300-mile journey. He does it in 7 days. It seems almost impossible, but he is really covering some ground here. Verse 24, Jehovah warns Laban against any harsh actions, which is hilarious in terms of how Laban ends up doing this. I mean, Laban's really having to hone it all in here. He's been warned, but he pushes the envelope again and again. And God tells him, don't say anything good or bad. Just leave it alone. You ever met somebody, maybe you've seen it on the Andy Griffith show or something, and they just can't help from messing up. They just, whatever they say, it just ends up being bad. And God's like, Laban, just leave them be. Don't say anything. Don't bless them. Don't curse them. Laban gives the hurt feelings approach. He feels like he's been wronged on this 20-year wealth increase. And he just bless his heart, Verse 29, Laban tells of Jehovah's commanded him. Laban wants his gods back. So this is really the crux of the matter. Laban has ran and caught up with them as much as anything, it seems. When we read this, he's worried about these idols that were stolen. He is wound up about that. And it is a big deal to him for whatever reason. These handmade images that are his gods, he has to track the gods down. Think about the mindset on that. I've got to go find my gods. We have to remember that is just should be very, very foreign to what should be right and good. God is always with us, right? We shouldn't have to go hunt our gods down. We can roll that into materialism in our current world, the worship of all the things in our culture, whatever they may be, sports, your careers, I mean, whatever we've got to be just kind of very patient and wait for God. Guys, thank you all for your work and your discussion today.